Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, nestlers, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. And let's go to Syria. Talk about this new public agreement as of July 6th between the United States and Russia to coordinate airstrikes in Syria. And apparently, Putin is the one who made the phone call and arranged this. And one is immediately struck by the fact that the only thing different about this is a public acknowledgement. Anybody that's paid attention could have seen all along that somehow, some way, the United States and Russia were sharing intelligence and coordinating airstrikes in Syria. And one of the things I like about that, of course, is it proves once again that the public narrative that is used for political purposes and all the saber rattling and all the threats from the United States and Russia all have to do with public posturing, and that the United States and Russia can find their way to easily work together in a situation like this. And one of the other things I like about this story, of course, is when the ceasefire was called several months back, I called it just a new phase in the war in Syria, and I also pointed out the fact that Russian withdrawal from Syria would be relative, and that's turned out to be very true. The war really never discontinued, never really stopped. It only morphed into something a little different. But so now we're talking about public acknowledgement of ongoing coordination, and this in spite of Crimea, this in spite of Ukraine, this in spite of all the NATO buildup in Europe and all the war of words. And so now they're making it public. They're going to share intelligence. They're going to have theoretically a joint command center, and then sort out the next complication, which is to separate who are the militant groups, who are the Syria and Russia and the United States are going to coordinate who needs to be bombed. So that's going to be very complicated in itself. And this is also not a big surprise because for those who were reading the news back in March, Russian foreign minister had already announced that U.S. and Russia were planning a military coordination against ISIS in Syria. And so this has been in the works for a while. So once again, this public acknowledgement has some political purpose, and it's an interesting one because now, after all the kicking and screaming, we now have Russia and the United States, once again, strange bedfellows, supposedly coordinating their efforts in Syria. So how that will be coordinated, I'm going to be fascinated to see, considering the United States supports forces that want to topple Assad, and Russia supports the Assad regime itself. So how they can actually coordinate their attacks it says a lot about the how things work in the world in total. What a bizarre arrangement, what a bizarre relationship, and it gets even more bizarre when you look at the fact that Putin has requested the U.S. to stop considering al-Nusra Front, the al-Qaeda offshoot, as, quote, moderates, unquote. And so that, once again, it'll be interesting to see how they separate it out, considering the only other effective force against Assad in Syria, besides ISIS, has been the al-Nusra Front. And the U.S. has been backing al-Nusra Front and supposed Free Syrian Army elements and other militias all over Syria, who also clash with each other. Who can forget some of the stories that appeared over the last month or so about various groups all backed by the United States and backed by the United States military and the United States CIA actually clashing with each other. I think that was in Aleppo when we had al-Nusra Front confronting YPG elements, the Kurdish. And so anyway, the U.S. has asked Russia not to bomb al-Nusra Front. So once again, there's another bizarre part of this situation where they're each asking each other to treat an al-Qaeda element a little differently. And then the last part of the story that's notable is the fact that now the UN says that 400,000 people have died since 2011 in Syria. And I remember when it reached the 50,000 and the 100,000 and 200,000 levels, there seemed to be a certain amount of global outrage, and you saw those figures bantered about all the time. But of course, it was being used to whip people into a war frenzy. And now that there's no political objective to bantering those figures around, we have a figure of 400,000, which is staggering by any stretch, and you don't even hear about it in the news because there is no political objective, and all the sadder to have that amount of carnage neglected because it has no political use. But there you have it. The U.S. and Russia ultimately together coordinating airstrikes against everybody else in Syria. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.